We are back. I'm so happy to be back with all of you and have an exciting announcement. We have a new sponsor for the podcast, Zinnia TV, which means that we can provide more resource, more encouragement, and hope for all of you in caregiving as an older adult and working with older adults at Will Gather. I believe in connection, especially when it comes to the care and well being of our loved ones. That is why I cannot wait to tell you more about Zinnia TV. It is more than just entertainment. It is a tool designed to bring moments of calm, joy, meaningful engagement into the lives of those living with dementia and cognitive challenges. Their carefully curated content is specifically created to stimulate memories, reduce anxiety, and build a sense of connection. So whether you are a caregiver, a healthcare professional, or a family member, Zinnia TV provides a way to support your loved ones in a compassionate, human-centered way. It's about honoring who they are, where they are, and how they experience the world. And I'm really proud to partner with this company. It aligns with my mission. I invite you to visit zinniatv.com to learn more and use the code GATHER20 for 20% off an annual subscription. And here we go. We're going to dive into my episode with Aisha Adkins. Aisha and I talk about what happens when caregiving and advocacy collide, when your personal journey turns into a movement. How do we navigate this complex world of caregiving, and especially as a younger caregiver or person of color? Caregiving is often unseen, unrecognized, undervalued, yet it is the invisible backbone of our communities. And for so many, the experience of caregiving is deeply shaped by systemic barriers, cultural expectations, and lack of resource. So today, I'm honored to be joined by Aisha Adkins. She is a powerhouse, a caregiver, a founder, a writer, a speaker, and a thought leader, using media, storytelling, and policy change to shape a more inclusive and equitable care infrastructure. She is the founder of Caregivers of Color Collective and works with caring across generations. She is amplifying voices that have often been left out of conversation. We talk about how caregiving for her parents has reshaped her life and purpose, what unique challenges that caregivers of color face, and why storytelling is one of the most powerful tools for change, how public health, media, and grassroots advocacy can create community when caregiving feels isolating. I am so grateful for this conversation, and the insights will leave you thinking about caregiving in a new way. Here's my interview with Aisha Adkins. Aisha, it's a pleasure to have you. It's a conversation I've been looking forward to. Our paths have crossed around each other and we've had a little bit of communication, but really thankful you're here and really, really looking forward to just learning and having a conversation. So thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. It's wonderful to finally get an opportunity to speak with you. You're right, after our paths crossing over the years, it's lovely to connect.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for taking the time. Uh, you wear so many different impactful hats: family caregiver, writer, thought leader, organizer, founder of Caregiver of Color Collective, working for caring across generations and much more. So I'm really looking forward to how all of this fuels your passion and how your story has brought you into all the work that you're doing.
Most definitely. I am looking forward to sharing.
This is really personal, right? With your family, your mom and your dad. I'd love for you to tell us more of that, about your experience and how it has shaped your advocacy and your mission.
Most certainly. So, really, like I think a lot of family caregivers, dare I say most, I was thrown into the role unexpectedly. When my mother was diagnosed with frontotemporal degeneration in 2013, 13. And I was around 27 at the time and was really unprepared. I was very unfamiliar with the condition, but I knew enough about dementia to realize that there was going to be a level of care needed. I knew that, working full time, I was working in healthcare at the time, um, would probably not be the best fit. As I tried to initially juggle both, that became abundantly clear as my mother's safety became an issue, um, and just kind of managing the day to day of making sure that she had the support she needed as she was navigating this journey as well. Um, Being able to do that and work full time away from home was really challenging. Additionally, finding information that was digestible regarding caregiving and the condition of dementia, um, finding resources that were affordable and accessible, all of those things proved to be a great challenge. And I really became interested in gaining knowledge and information around the disease and around what resources could potentially become available or what resources could I create um, as I began getting involved with my now employer, Caring Across Generations. I started out as a volunteer. I'm a writer in another life as well. And so I did a couple of guest blogs and those sorts of things after coming across them at a conference for women in digital media, and really just uh, became very passionate when I discovered that there were policies and things in place that could uh, really improve the lives of family caregivers, people living with various diseases and disabilities, and older adults. But it takes voices like my own to really elevate the awareness around the lack of access to resources, and particularly for communities of color. And so I've always been really passionate about uh, cultivating those spaces and raising awareness for the resources that are currently available and collaborating with others to create resources where they currently do not exist.
That's one common theme I hear specifically right from younger caregivers is there isn't a place to really go initially, right? And like finding people that can support you. Were there a couple organizations that stood out or people that were able to offer support and resource like as you were learning and
Mhm.
finding the gaps to see where you could, yeah, step in and use your voice?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are so many amazing advocates, so many wonderful influencers in this space that continue to arise every day, who really so bravely um, let us into their world as family caregivers. You think of, gosh, there are just so many people, and I'd hate to leave someone out if I named them all, but I think that, like, they're being able to connect with people virtually. I found via Facebook groups and other forms of social media um, has been a true lifesaver for me, and it's a lifeline. I think social media gets such a bad rap for what it's for really the undeniable damage that it can do, right? But I think there are so many positives to being able to connect with people from all over the world who share the same lived experience or similar experiences around caregiving, particularly for younger adults who may not feel as seen in some of the other more kind of traditional uh, support groups and those sorts of things that tend historically to be geared toward an older demographic. And so being able to connect with people and say, hey, I'm around your age. Would you like to Zoom sometime? Or maybe if you're in the same city and you get an opportunity, would you like to meet for a cup of coffee? Those sorts of things. And I've found that I, through these groups, have really made some of the strongest friendships that I've ever had in my life. And that's something that I will definitely walk away from this entire experience of caregiving taking with me. It's just those bonds and those relationships with people who, are able to say, hey, I'm experiencing something very similar to you. Let's talk about it. And I think um, you know, being able to read about other people's experiences, being able to share my own experience, uh, you know, that has just created this this sense of community that is so invaluable. And I really encourage others to seek out community as much as possible as they're on this journey.
We're not alone. And when you can find people that are sharing in the walk with you and understands it, right? Just that, I mean, that's so, I would say, encouraging for all of us to like have people that we can call in it. And with social media, I love how you touch on, right? There's like challenges, but then the gifts that come from it. And when I share with people the incredible presence of people that are sharing their caregiving story and offering insight. If they're not in that world, they're blown away by the incredible that are showing up and courageously, right? I mean, it's hard to put ourselves out there, but I think it's just touching so many lives, and the impact of that. And from your sharing about traditional, maybe healthcare organizations or companies, that can feel a little sterile in terms of like how they connect or relate. We want to connect with a human. And I think that that's what that really lends itself. And I'm encouraged that I think more companies are partnering with people that are using their voice in those ways, which is so, so great, right? As we continue to collectively create that awareness is, yeah, really, really important. Really important. I know life has shifted for you since your mom's passing. And I was reading an article or blog that you wrote about, the moments, right? Those milestones, and knowing that that can be just like a change, right? And we have grief in that. How are you finding that there's an adaptation, right? Grief will always be there, but in what ways are you able to kind of work through some of those moments?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think grief is so fluid,
Mhm.
right? And it's something that needs to be confronted every day.
Yeah.
And so there are days when I wake up and the feelings are so palpable and so heavy and so tangible. And then there are other days when I wake up and I feel filled with hope and I'm filled with joy and I'm able to remember fondly the life that I shared with my mother. And it really shifts, throughout this walk that I continue on, this path of grief.
Mhm.
But I think the place that I'm at now is one of recognizing that I did the best that I could with the tools that I had available to me, and that I loved her the best that I could.
Mhm.
I think that, within grief, I felt a lot of guilt and shame, particularly during the experience of ambiguous grief, because I felt as though I did not always react the way that I should have, or I didn't conduct myself as gracefully as I had hoped that I would, um, while being my mother's caregiver. What I failed to give myself credit for was the fact that I still cared for her as best as I could while holding the very real fact that, frontotemporal degeneration is a terminal illness,
Mhm.
and not really fully having the opportunity to process that impending loss while I managed to care for my mother. Um, and so I'm able to now look back in retrospect and say, wow, Aisha, you actually did a very good job. And you can't compare yourself to anyone else's journey. You cannot blame yourself for the way that you respond to hurt and pain. And so those are things that I'm beginning to understand about that journey. And I bring those lessons into caring for my father who's living with vascular dementia, chronic kidney disease, and a couple of other ailments. And I'm bringing those lessons into this experience. And I'm trying to approach with curiosity. How can I manage my grief differently? How can I recognize grief when it shows up and meet it with coping mechanisms that I'm learning now that I didn't have then?
Yeah.
And I think that that's really those are the things that I'm
Mm.
learning about grief as I still continue to process it today.
Yeah, it's such an evolution, right? As we like unpack a lot about ourselves and processing those emotions that we haven't gone through before. Yeah, the evolution of that and
Mhm.
the awareness. When you share, right, with storytelling, your voice in public health, how have you seen storytelling be this powerful tool of driving systematic change in caregiving in public health spaces? I know it's been a powerful avenue for you.
Yes, what I've witnessed in terms of storytelling in caregiving and public health, um, I've witnessed this kind of groundswell of empowerment among community members. And I think it's important to acknowledge family caregivers, acknowledge folks with disabilities and older adults as a part of the equation when we're looking at these systems of change. And I think that the more that we share our lived experiences, the more that we talk about the things that are challenging, the more we kind of normalize these roles and normalize the way that people show up. And I think that when we normalize these things, we can garner support. I think it's really difficult to support the unseen, right? And by continuing to talk about things and through the art of storytelling, I think we take the cover off of so much. And when we take that cover off, we remove shame and we remove guilt. We remove all of these like negative associations that people often have with sickness, with caregiving, with disability, right? And there's nothing to be ashamed of. There's nothing to feel guilty about. These are all perfectly normal, natural parts of life, but they're so hidden under this like cloak of secrecy. I think in some communities more than others, and I think that just does such a great disservice to communities overall. And so, by uncovering, these realities, we
Mhm.
can then determine together what is it that we need, right? What is the service that we would most greatly benefit our communities, and how do we make sure that the most vulnerable among us, the most in need among us, and ultimately all of us get what we need in order to not only survive day to day, but to thrive over the course of our lives.
Yeah, bring it into the light.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Caregivers of Color Collective is
Mhm.
a powerful initiative. Can you share with us what inspired you to launch it? Tell us about that so we can, yeah,
Ah,
help, further the awareness around that.
yeah, I mean, right now we are focusing kind of on our social media presence, but the ultimate goal and the hope is for there to be a hub, to be a centralized place for caregivers of color who may feel overlooked and underseen by healthcare systems and by other entities that traditionally serve family caregivers. You know, it gives them the opportunity to say collectively that we have a space that is sacred, that acknowledges the cultural components that impact caregiving and also the systemic and historical landscapes that impact the way that care is given and received in this country, in particular in the US. And I think that really providing a place for people to connect with one another and to access resources that say, listen, we are serving you, whether it's exclusively serving communities of color or inclusive of communities of color. I think it's important to have spaces like this that people can rely on to say, hey, you know what, I've been seen, I've been heard, and there are resources that are catering specifically to my needs. And for that, I I have a lot of gratitude. And so it's we're slow in the process, getting things off the ground, just kind of being intentional about cultivating conversations with family caregivers who are, using their platforms to raise awareness, putting together, information and resource sheets and things like that. But, as we continue to grow and as more folks continue to sign on throughout the following year, throughout 2025, our hope is that we'll, continue to amplify and elevate the voices that sometimes don't receive don't always receive the amount of attention that they could. And it's really just about giving people access and raising awareness.
I am looking forward to continuing to help amplify in the ways that I can too. So, yeah, the more conversations, there are, as you were sharing with caregivers of color, those layers of complexity. You had talked about, access to resources or those systematic inequities. And for people listening, can you share more about? What are some of those challenges that you might have personally experienced, but also observed through your work so we can have awareness and also be supporters of making sure that we can all do our part in helping elevate the resources and meeting
Yeah,
needs in the ways that we can?
most definitely. So, some of the challenges that, caregivers of color might experience, I'll start off by saying that it's a varied experience because no community is a monolith, right? And so my experience might differ from someone else's. That being said, you know, um, things like access to reliable home care, underdiagnoses, misdiagnoses, you know, uh, healthcare, bias within the healthcare system, just higher propensities of various diseases that necessitate care in the first place, right? Higher levels of disability in communities of color overall. All of these things are impactful um, and make for what can be a challenging experience. It's not the sole definer of our lived experience, but it can impact the way that we experience care, either on the giving or receiving end, or both, depending on our circumstances. And I think that, for those who are interested in, um, being a part of the solution and being allies, I think it's, you know, um, certainly being supportive of those in your life who may experience some of these inequities, and be on the receiving ends of the systemic racism and and things of that nature. And I think you know, calling it out when you see it, and also for professionals who are in the healthcare industry, making sure that you're aware of your own biases, and really kind of consulting with yourself and saying, how can I do things differently? How can I um, garner more support for my patients of color, and what resources might be available. I mean, even things like making sure that communities of color are aware of clinical trials, and understanding the complexities that exist within communities of color surrounding trust within the healthcare system, and being willing to participate in clinical trials, right? Things like that. Become paramount in making sure that people get the treatment that they need, and that family caregivers, can assist their loved ones in this process. So those are just some examples. And I think, taking into consideration, cultural competency or cultural familiarity with matching paid care workers to families. There might be things with to take into consideration with language, right? Making sure that people can communicate in a language that's most comfortable for them. All of those sorts of um, things that for those who are a part of a predominant society, um, may not take into consideration right away. Religious considerations, all of these things we sometimes consider as an afterthought, that really can be significant in terms of the quality of care that we are able to give and receive, and therefore the quality of life that we experience and that we live. I think that, you know, what to some might be a detail or a small detail, to someone else could be um, really a huge difference maker. So those are just some of the things that I think about. Um, and then of course I think on the policy level as well, I think, supporting, local officials even who have a care agenda, right? Who think about the way that care impacts their constituents, and who are eager to partner with their constituents in building up a care infrastructure. Those are the kinds of things that make a huge difference.
Yeah. Where would we go to learn our, for the policymakers where they stand on those care initiatives so we can start
Mhm.
to have awareness and have conversation and ask those, challenge them, right? That this is what
Yeah.
we're wanting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. So, definitely every, elected official has a website, and that's where you'll find out about the committees they belong to, the initiatives they support, the bills and the policies that they've, supported, and also, chosen not to support. And, I encourage folks to reach out to their elected officials. I encourage folks to send emails, write letters, make a phone call. They want to hear from you. We've put them in office, and so in many ways they work for us. And it's valuable to start those conversations. And it goes back again to storytelling and sharing your experience. I've talked with my elected officials and I've said, hey, listen, this has been my experience as a caregiver, and these are some of the things that I've found challenging, and here are some ways that I feel like you could be of help and could be a problem solver here. And let's continue to have these conversations. And I've never had an experience where they've said that they'd rather not hear from me. So I just encourage that open dialogue, and that offering of perspective for elected officials who may or may not have a shared lived experience with you. Um, and, I encourage mm, boldness in that.
Mhm. I love the language that you use too, right? Like sharing your story, but also asking for their support in that. One point you had shared was just around even like for us as like as allies. And I know that sometimes we don't know maybe what questions to ask or how we can be supportive. So what I've seen happen is then people just don't say anything. And that's so detrimental. And for me, even if I might be uncomfortable or feel bad that I don't know something, I've just led with curiosity, as you were saying, and I want to learn. And I think if you come from the heart of that, that those really, meaningful conversations can come out of that. Yeah.
Most definitely. Most definitely.
I wanted to have you share a little bit about, with stories and amplifying voice and pushing change. Are you finding that caregivers, once they, I would say, interact with you or hear you use the platform that you have, um, be able to kind of come along with you and also raise their voices, right? I think at times we, as leaders, can see other people that might be in our world that we want to also have, shine a light on. Have you seen that ripple effect take place for you?
I've definitely seen that ripple effect where people are encouraged
Mhm.
by hearing others' stories, and they may be afraid at first, they may be nervous or anxious, and then they see that others are able to boldly share their lived experience, and they say, you know what, gosh, they're a person just like I am, they're human, and they're doing a scary thing, and I think I might be able to do it as well. And when they take that first step, when they make that first move, I think that the fear starts to leave and starts to subside, um, and people really appreciate the opportunity to have their voices heard and um, to feel seen and to make a difference. And you're right, there is this ripple effect that takes place where whether it's on a grander scale and grand stages, where we've seen people give talks to thousands of people, or whether this is within communities and one-to-one dialogues, I think that it's almost impossible to minimize, or I should say that you cannot minimize the impact that storytelling can have on um, society as a whole. Once one short story is shared, you can't unshare it, right? It's just unleashed, and what people decide to do with that is up to them ultimately. But there is a tremendous um, uh, kind of domino effect that can take place.
Yeah, there really is. I would love for you to also tell us more about caring across generations and what
Yeah.
systems are prevalent there.
So with the work that I do, I hear from caregivers all the time, and it's such a privilege and an honor when people read, pieces that I've written, or something that I've posted on social media, and it resonates with them. And for anyone who is listening to this podcast, um, the message that I have is that, you know, as isolating and as lonely as caregiving can feel at times, you're not alone. I think that that's a message that I would love to just underscore, is that there are people who are experiencing very similar things right alongside you. And I encourage you to reach out, whether it's to me or to someone else that you connect with whose story resonates with you. But I cannot impress enough the importance of human connection when you're going through a really, really difficult time. And that's something that oftentimes needs to be cultivated. But whether it's through a virtual support group or through just one-to-one interaction and connection, it goes a long way to making a difference in your overall well-being. I know that for me, throughout the course of my caregiving journey, mental health has been something that I've also um, I've not only struggled with, but also really championed in terms of moving toward mental wellness throughout the journey. And so, you know, I encourage everyone to take any opportunity to connect with people, um, not just other caregivers, but other people in your lives who can maybe be of support and even if it's in a small way. I think that's so important. And I think kind of switching gears a little bit, but on a somewhat related note, I'm really fortunate to work with an organization, Caring Across Generations, which is a policy advocacy organization that advocates for family caregivers, older adults, and disabled people um, for better access to the resources and supports that we all need and can all benefit from. And, I think before I began working with Caring Across Generations, even in a volunteer capacity, I did not realize the sense of community that I could get from not only interacting with other family caregivers, some of whom happen to be around my age, but also working together to affect positive change at the systemic level, at the systems level, at the policy level. And so I think that when we have purpose and we put purpose to our caregiving that is in tandem with the caregiving itself, I think that it does something to the spirit, right? It emboldens us and gives us this feeling of like this sense of ownership over our circumstances in a way because there are so many components to caregiving that feel unfair, right? That over which we don't have any control. But I feel like when we really assert our power, our collective power, as a unit, we get to experience a sense of duty and a sense of purpose in a way that so many, I think, family caregivers, older adults, and disabled people really value and it just gives us the opportunity to act together, unified, in order to see changes that we want to experience. And um, I'm really privileged to be a part of an organization that's doing such great work.
I love that. It's such an important conversation, and I love how you tie in purpose. I love that. I had a friend of mine, Anna Hall, talk about purpose, and purpose is what gives us our joy fuel, right? To be able to sustain and have the resiliency and all of that we need, in our caregiving. So thank you for that beautiful perspective. And I just love hearing your wisdom and your heart about all of this. And I would love for people to learn more about you and be able to connect with you. Can you tell us where we can do that?
Yes, please feel free to connect with me via social media. It's Aisha Adkins on X and I think Blue Skies, the new venture now. And then Aisha.Adkins on Instagram. Um, I am here and I'd love to hear from you.
Thank you so much for just the encouragement and hearing what you've learned, but then how you are helping guide us in just a supported way as we're navigating these hard times in life and whatever they may be. So I appreciate that and I appreciate you. Thank you.
I appreciate you as well, Nicole. Thank you for your time and for sharing your platform. This has been wonderful.
Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed our episode, please subscribe and give us 5 stars. In all honesty, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening to our episode.